Hey guys, I'm Tim from Anything Scout, and today we're going to show you guys how to disassemble a Scout 2 steering column. Okay, today we have a Scout 2 steering column kind of rigged up on this jig. This is a standard non-tilt column. We will do a video on the tilt column specifics here. That's coming up. Today, basically, I'm going to walk through how to remove your steering wheel and replace your turn signal switch and cancel cam. We'll also walk through the ignition tumbler and your ignition switch and the horn components, as well as the horn relay that is mounted here. All right, and the tools you'll need are pretty standard. There are a couple of exceptions. Basically, what you'll need is various size sockets, depending on what tool you have for your steering wheel removal. This steering wheel removal tool is key because of the 2-post straight pole style. The part number's there if you want to order this one or one similar to this. You'll need a standard Phillips screwdriver, flat blade screwdriver, some kind of side cutters, ratchet, a flat blade, very skinny like pocket screwdriver, pick, and this is a depinning tool. You can honestly, if you have a small enough pocket screwdriver, you can probably use this. You may not even need this, but I'm including it just in case. An extension to get through for the steering wheel nut. And this tool is a homemade deal. I will list the dimensions to make this. This will actually help in depressing the cancel cam so that you can remove that. And we'll go over that more in detail when I use it. Okay, so first things first, this is our standard Scout 2 wheel. There are different variations. Some will have a tri-bar. Those have a bunch of screws on the back to get the horn cap off. This is pretty standard for most Scouts anyway that you're going to be running into with a standard non-tilt column. What you do is a quarter turn to the left will remove this cap, and a lot of times these nubs, this one's broken there, and this plate will be broken. You may not even have a horn cap. We do sell those new. I'll go over that. This is what the view inside your steering wheel is going to be. These are the horn contact leads. You'll want to disconnect those. Just the one on the main piece here, and you'll have these 3 screws. We'll grab our Phillips screwdriver and start taking those off. And the piece that I'm removing now is not only the horn cap retainer, but it will also be the contacts for the horn itself. There's a plate that will come off with this. And with that horn contact wire disconnected, you can thread it through this plastic piece. And then your contact set will come out with it. Set those aside. The orientation is kind of important on these. There is 2 tabs that obviously the contact plugs to, so just kind of keep that in mind when you set it aside. Set it in order and remember the orientation of the wheel when you do that. Next, we're going to take the center nut loose. This is a lot easier to do when you have, a Scout attached to your steering wheel. This might be a little tricky, but I'm going to try the best to get this loose. Now, we're not fully removing this nut. We're just going to loosen it to the end of the threads and leave kind of a little cove where it's only engaged maybe 1 or 2 threads, but you can easily take it off by hand. And then we're going to grab our puller and stick that in here. What you'll need for your pulling tool are 3-inch long, 3-inch long, 1/4 inch by 28 thread pitch. So a fine thread 1/4 inch bolt for your puller tool. That's the thread that is inside the steering wheel. So we're going to grab the puller tool with those bolts and go from there. All right, so I've got my pulling tool threaded in. You'll want these bolts to be snug, not terribly tight, but at least 4 or 5 threads in so that you have good engagement on the steering wheel itself. The reason I left this nut here was to give the center of my pulling tool something to kind of stay within so it doesn't mushroom out the threads on the steering column itself. So now we're just going to take up some of the slack on that. Come back with the bigger socket here and just start driving this puller down. And sometimes these get really tight and it takes a bit to get the wheel off. There it goes. And now the steering wheel can come off the shaft, so you'll just take out your puller and we'll take the bolts off and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so we got the steering wheel off And this will be the view that you see a lot of without the tilt column underneath. You'll have a locking plate. That is your key lock, basically comes back and will lock into the indents of this plate. This is the horn contact spring. Take that out, make sure you don't lose that. We'll need that later. And I'm going to show you how to do the turn signal switch replacement, but also we're going to be replacing this cancel cam because it's broken. So next thing I'm going to do is take my special tool this is very homemade, but works amazing. Basically 1-inch square tube. It's got a 9/16 hole in the outside, so it slides right over there. You will use your steering wheel nut and just basically go thread this down. Basically, I should say the specs of this tool, you're gonna want about 1 3/8 height, just so that you get some thread engagement here. And we just welded some washers on here, and that basically just takes the pressure away because there's a snap ring that you're gonna have to take out of this threaded part of your column to release all of this and get to your cancel cam. So next we're just going to tighten this down, and you'll see as we tighten this, it's going to put pressure on this plate and it'll start to go down. There's a giant spring behind this, and you want to compress that spring and take up the slack so you can get to that snap ring. Okay, with that compressed, we're going to grab our pick and small pocket screwdriver, and right here is the snap ring. So we've basically compressed this plate in and exposed this snap ring. These are very difficult to get out sometimes. Bear with me here. I'm going to try my best to get it on camera. But there is a split in the snap ring. What I try and do is I'll orient the tool to a point where the ends are, so then I can spread the ends and try and snap it up over the column and remove it. You will need a lot of patience for this part of the project. Okay, so I've rotated the snap ring all the way around so you can see there is a split in it. Basically what you want to do is you want to spread that split open and get it over this, out of the little valley that it's in and on top of the steering column shaft. Okay, so now as you can see the snap ring is out of the valley it was in, and this is where you want to take both your screwdrivers and just kind of work that snap ring off of the center shaft of your column. This does take a lot of patience and time. This is not a fast process by any means, so just take your time and work through it. And we'll get that worked up to the splines here. And then it's time to slowly release this nut, and we will pull the tool off. It's important to go slow. This is spring. There's a pretty heavy spring behind this, so you just want to make sure you don't have that shoot out. So now that that's off, this is going to want to spin because I don't have a truck holding it. All right, there is the tool off. That's off. Now you're going to slide the rest of the way off of that with the snap ring. The locking plate will come next. Notice there is a little notch in the end of your steering wheel. That is supposed to be straight up and down. So when we reassemble this, I'll make sure I orient that and show you which way it should go back together. There's the locking ring. This is what's left of the cancel cam. So we'll remove that. There are two different styles. So if you have a tilt column, it will be different than the non-tilt column. And I will show you the differences now. Okay, so these are visually very similar, but very, very different. So make sure you check which column you have before you order these on our site, anythingscout.com. And this is the non-tilt column. It's flat on the bottom. So there's no cone or any taper or anything. This is the tilt column. There's a taper on the inside and a taper that follows all the way out to the outside. This will not cancel the turn signal on a standard column. So make sure that you have the correct one for your application. And those are again available on our site. And we will be installing the non-tilt column when this goes back together. Okay, with the plate out of the way and the cancel cam out of the way, you have easy access to your turn signal switch and your stock. Some of these will have a cruise control stock. It attaches the same way. There's 4 screws that hold this into the column. We will be taking those out now, starting with this already very loose steering column stock. These are all Phillips heads. number 2 screws, so you'll just take these out. The turn signal stock screw is a very long screw, so just be mindful of that. We'll set that aside. If yours is like this and pitted and very rusty, we do sell new ones on our site, and I will be installing that when we reinstall the column. With that out of the way, you'll want to turn your turn signal switch down, and then you'll have view of these 3 screws here. They're Phillips head screws, and we'll start removal of those, and that will loosen the turn signal switch inside the steering column and allow us to take it out. And don't lose these down in there. It can be kind of easy, so just pull them out, set them aside, keep them away from the other ones. If you can't reach them, just leave them in the switch and keep your thumb over it or something. When you pull this out, you'll be able to take those out. And it looks like that one wants to stay too. This column didn't have it, but you will have a hazard switch button off the bottom of the switch. That uses a Phillips screw just in the center of it. Loosen that up, pull the button off before we try and remove the switch. Otherwise, it'll get stuck inside the column. And now, before we remove this, we'll cut the old wiring because we have a new switch. And it's just a lot easier to than trying to get this old connector back through the column just to cut the wires. So have your side cutters ready here. I usually just cut at the base of this bracket and just snip those guys. Now it is very important that you keep the end of this and all of the wiring in your old connector. I'll go through that in just a minute. So don't throw this away. Just cut the wires just for ease of removal. And we'll come back up here and we'll start pulling the switch out. And it does get kind of fussy. So you'll have, these wires are 40 plus years old. So you'll kind of want to make sure that they're all flat and then just kind of push and pull at the same time. We'll just keep pulling out of the top here. And there is your turn signal switch. Just take out the other 2 screws here, set those up there. And there's your old switch removed. All right, now with that switch out of here, if you're going to do your ignition tumbler, now's the time to do it. There is a release to get the whole tumbler out of there, and that little slot is right here. So you'll take your pocket screwdriver, there's a spring-loaded clip in the new tumbler, and you'll depress that clip, and then your whole tumbler should just come right out of the cylinder. And this has been in here for a long time, so you might have to hold this release, get your other screwdriver in there, and just kind of pry on it very easily, but it might get stuck on you. So it's just kind of a process of working it back and forth and getting the tumbler to come out. There it goes. And there you go. That is the release that you're looking for to get your old tumbler out. Now is a great time if your tumbler is a little sticky or it was kind of hard to get out of there. Just shoot some, WD-40 or something down in the area you're going to be installing it back in, and just kind of work that back and forth with a new key. New key will show up to your house looking like this, and installation is super easy. Basically just put it in the housing in the off position, depress that button. There should be a track that will be at the very bottom of the key cylinder. Basically you just push in and it'll go 1 click, and then you should be able to depress the release again, and it will take it all the way inside there. Just like that. And be sure to cycle it back and forth. Just get it working to where you're happy with it. We do also sell the top inner workings, the slide mechanism that the tumbler actuates. That'll be in a separate video, but we do sell those parts if yours are either broken or just really crunchy and your key cycle doesn't automatically spring back like it should, or any of that. We do sell the parts for that as well on our site. So with that actuating like it should, pretty happy with that. We'll go back and we'll install our cancel cam and turn signal switch.
All right.
Okay, so I brought our new switch over to the bench. I'm just gonna kind of walk you through the differences between the early and late trucks. Will have different switch side and truck side plugs. This is a pretty common one for the later models. This is the style that the new switch will automatically come with. And we are working on getting these available on our site. So this is the truck side of this connector. So it will go in here and connect up to this style. There is also an early model which uses a different connector, which will not work with the later model plastic. So we are working on getting this to be available on our site. That is where your pinning tool will come into play. If you do need to repin these, just keep in mind where the orientation of your colored wires going into your column is, and they will be in the same orientation for the early and late plugs. They will just be a different plug physically. So you'll have to unpin these, which you'll slide in here, just press the tab down, and it should just come right out. And then you'll put that new pin in the correct orientation on the other plug. Again, on this truck, we don't have to do that. It is already going to be the correct plug, but it is something to keep in mind, and that is why you will need a pinning tool. Okay, now it's time to put in our new switch. This opening at the bottom where the old wiring came through is where you're going to be shooting for your new wiring to slide through. I usually start with the wires off to the left, plastic off to the right. Just fish that down through that open space down there. Once it comes through the column, then you can go on the bottom side of your steering bracket here. And that will go down through there. It gets a little tight, but it does make it all the way through pretty easily. These are very flexible, being new switch wiring. Helps a lot with that. Once you get to a certain point, you will have to orient your switch in here and make sure that all of your wiring doesn't get in the way. You will want your hazard, this is your hazard switch provision. That will be pointing off to the right here. So we're going to slide that switch in now and make sure that that lines up with the opening in the column and that none of my wiring is getting pinched as I'm doing that. And just got to tuck my wiring a little bit differently here. Sometimes you'll have to rotate the switch. It gets spun up a little bit in packaging. But that should be now where I need it to be. Just put that down in there, just like that. And then you can finish pulling out the rest of the wiring here. There is a bracket that holds the wiring to the column, and this new switch should just slide right in there like the old one. All right, now we're going to grab our 3 mounting screws that we had from earlier, and those should just drop right in there. And I do like to start all 3 of these before I tighten any of them, just to make sure that it's not, walking the switch down in there crooked or anything, and just making sure that I have the screws started straight and the provision in the column for them. And then you can work through and start tightening them down. Now's the time to install. If you ordered our new turn signal stock, we'll put that in. Same screw there. And we'll just drive this down, snug it up. You'll want it to be pretty tight. That other one that we pulled out was not only rusty, but the plastic on the switch was actually broken that held this, so it was really floppy and loose. So it'll be nice to have an upgrade with a new switch. All right, we got our new turn signal stock in there. Always test everything really well before we go through and reassemble. Make sure it's smooth and it's pretty tight in there. I've got a hazard switch button, and this is keyed, and it's important to make sure that the keyed part of that goes into the keyed part of the switch so that it goes in there flat and doesn't twist. Just tighten the screw on that guy there and make sure that functions. Seems to work well. So now we can start reassembly. This will be the same as disassembly in reverse, obviously. First thing that will go in is our non-tilt new cancel cam. The way that I like to orient this is to make sure that our steering column is vertical. The tabs on the back, these 2 nubs, go into this channel here. So you'll want this plastic piece to go about 10:30 to 11 o'clock as you're looking at it. Then you'll put your locking plate in. There's a provision for the cancel cam plastic to stick through this. And I don't know if you can see that, but there is an opening on this plate that is, there's a bunch of teeth and then there's an opening. There's a bunch of teeth and an opening also on the splines of your steering column. So you'll want to make sure you line those up and get this slid on there, just like that. Should drop right on. And then we'll use our special tool again to compress it and get the snap ring on. So start your snap ring now. Put that over the threads, get that onto the splines there. Like that. And then we'll put our tool on and snap the snap ring back in once it's compressed. Okay, now I've got our tool started there. This will start compressing that, and then we can just slip the snap ring back into place. And once you get to a certain point, your key lock should hold that plate, so it won't keep it, it'll keep it from spinning. If you're doing this in your truck as well, it'll keep it from spinning. So now I'm to that point, starting to compress the plate. It's pulling the steering column center out, and then once you get to snug, we'll take the pocket screwdriver and your regular screwdriver and we'll slip that snap ring back into place. All right, and we'll just slide that down over the splines and back into its original place. This can be tricky. Just take your time. It's kind of like taking it off of there. Getting it to go back on is significantly easier, but still kind of a trick. All right, now that I've got everything aligned, we're gonna take the tool back off. That snap ring should be seated. That'll hold tension off that spring and keep everything in place. And we'll do reassembly of the steering wheel at this point. So I've got this dash mark in the middle of my column facing pretty much straight up. It'll be a little bit off, that's okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. Well, don't forget the horn contact spring, very important. Your horn won't work without that. Slide that guy on there. Now, if you look at the back of your steering wheel, you'll have a little slot that has the contact feed point on it. You'll line that up with this cancel cam and make sure that you're in that opening so that it works properly and you don't break it. And then just kind of give it a little shuffle there. That'll be great. And then we'll put the center nut back on, tighten that down, and that should be steering wheel back on, and then we'll just go through the horn components quickly here. Before we put our horn back together, I wanted to show the new retainer clips that we sell on our site. This is the old retainer clip, and 9 times out of 10, this little tab that holds your horn button in place is broken, which means your horn cap will flop around or these little tabs will break. I'm not gonna put that one back on, obviously. I wanna put a new one on. It has this little spring tab that holds the horn contacts in place. We'll put that in place here, and reassembly is just like disassembly. Take this over here, thread our wire through, put the horn contacts back up, and put this back on there. Get your little isolators and screws. This will all go back together fairly simply here. All right. And also, we'll plug in our horn contact like it was before. Goes right there. Just tuck the wire down in there. Old horn cap had some broken studs. It's blue. This isn't blue. New ones we sell on our site, black. They have nice, strong provisions for locking them in place. Put that on, give it a quarter twist, and good to go. All right, guys, hopefully that was helpful. Multiple components we replaced today were the cancel cam, turn signal switch stock, ignition switch, horn, retainer, and horn button. Hopefully, again, that helps you guys to take on your own projects and do this on your own Scout at home. Again, all the parts we used today are available on our website, anythingscout.com, and we'll see you next time.